My name is Joy Carter. I'm a project geologist with Snowline Gold, exploring for gold in the Yukon in Canada. And I've been an SEG member since my undergrad at the University of Toronto, and I'm fortunate to be a member of the Early Careers Professionals Committee, and happy to be the moderator for today's symposium. For those of you who may not be familiar with SEG, the Society of Economic Geologists is committed to advancing the science of geology through the scientific investigation of mineral deposits and mineral resources, and the application thereof to exploration, mineral resource appraisal, mining, and mineral extraction. This includes the providing of world-class publications, workshops, webinars, field trips, and conferences, as well as developing the next generation of successful economic geologists. We highly encourage anyone interested in our organization, especially students and early career professionals, to visit the Society's web pages for more information. And now is a great time to join or renew and take advantage of all that SEG has to offer. Feel free to scan the QR code or visit our website at segweb.org for more details on membership. As I mentioned previously, I've been a member since my undergrad and been fortunate to receive scholarships that helped, student life and as well as my research and attend field trips in Sweden, in New Mexico, in the US, and it truly changed the trajectory of my career and my life. So I highly welcome you to join us with the SEG. And for those of you who are already members but looking to take your involvement to the next level, we highly encourage you to consider fellowship. Fellowship allows experienced and passionate individuals to give back even more to the next generation of geoscientists, whether through greater involvement in mentorship, providing guidance and direction on society committees, or helping to foster growth in key development areas. Please visit the membership page on our website for more details. And once again, thank you for joining us for today's event, the 2025 SEG Lecturers Symposium. So we can check off the first item on our agenda, the welcome and introductions. And today we'll be having our speakers, Stephen Roberts and Mei-Fu Zhou, presenting with comments by Jennifer Craig, Ann Thompson, and Alan Wilson as well. And just a reminder again that today's event is being recorded and will be available next week for on-demand streaming. And now I would like to warmly welcome Jennifer Craig, the Executive Director of SEG, to say a few words regarding the Society's Traveling Lecturers Program. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you, Joy. Second, I share my... Thank you, and hello everybody, and welcome to the SEG Lecture Symposium. Joy, it's really fantastic to hear the impact that SEG has had on your career. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve. I thought I'd give it a few more statistics on our year to date, 2025. This year, our community included over 6,350 members, and that's a nearly 5% growth on last year. So it's really fantastic to see. SEG comprises individuals who are working in industry, academia, government, and also beyond, who are committed to excellence in mineral deposit research and responsible resource development and the professional growth of the next generation of geoscientists. We currently have 109 student chapters across 34 countries globally. And this year, we've had a great year of dispersing over $700,000 in financial support to students across the world. Additionally, this year, we ran about 40 field trips, courses, and virtual offerings to students and professionals. These are also global field trips, workshops, and offerings. So a step change from last year, which is also really great to see. One of the ways in which SEG fulfills its mission is through its Distinguished Lecturer and Travelling Lecturer programmes. These long-standing initiatives are core to SEG's commitment to scientific dissemination, accessibility, and global engagement. I thought I'd talk a little bit about what the programmes are, especially for those in the audience who might be new to SEG. So first we have our SEG Distinguished Lecturer. This is SEG selects one Distinguished Lecturer each year. These individuals are nominated by the membership and fellows of the organisation, and they're chosen for internationally recognised excellence in economic geology and for major contributions in mineral deposit research and application of geoscience to their exploration or development. Another really important piece of our programme is that the individual who receives the award delivers a keynote address in plenary at the SEG annual conference. And I'm sure for anyone who's in Brisbane, you would have been there to have the wonderful talk from Mei-Fu Zhou at the conference. Okay. Oops, sorry. We also have our SEG Travelling Lecturer programme. So these are also selected annually, and these are experts who deliver talks worldwide to our chapters, universities, conferences, and professional groups around the world. We have our Thayer Lindsley Visiting Lecturer. This individual is nominated for excellence in economic geology, and they lecture primarily at universities that are undertaking mineral resource programmes. We have our Regional Vice President Lecturer. This individual generally delivers talks in SEG designated regions and rotates among the regions every year. Lastly, we have our International Exchange Lecturer, and these individuals are chosen for distinguished research in ore deposit science and exploration, and they lecture across academia, academic industry and government audiences internationally. So there is a selection process, and lecturers are chosen annually by the SEG Lecturer Committees. And I would encourage everybody to consider putting forward nominations. Nominations can come from SEG members and fellows, and they will be accepted in 2026 until the 31st of May, and that is for the 2027 awardees. Final selections are approved at the September Council meeting each year. So it gives me great pleasure to bring the 2025 SEG lecturers into the conversation. I already mentioned our distinguished lecturer, Mei-Fu Zhou. Our Thayer Lindsley visiting lecturer this year is Stephen Roberts, and our regional vice president lecturer is Juan Carlos Castelli. Unfortunately, Juan Carlos is unable to join us today, so we will only have 2 presentations. He's doing what he should be doing, and he's in the field. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending and hand you back over to our moderator. Thank you.
Whoops, sorry everyone. I definitely started talking with myself muted, so let's start that again. All right, so Stephen has worked at the School of Ocean and Earth Science, University of Southampton, UK, for the past 40 years, serving as chair of the department between 2016 and 2020. Stephen has published more than 100 research articles investigating the wide range of mineral forming systems. He has taken a particular interest in the formation of seafloor massive sulfides, exploring the natural laboratories offered by seafloor hydrothermal vent sites. Research highlights include sailing on the International Ocean Drilling Expedition, Leg 193, to the Pacmanus hydrothermal vent field in the Manus Basin, and the IODP Leg 376 to the Brothers Volcano, located in the Kermadec Arc. He also participated in a remotely operated vehicle campaign to the deepest known hydrothermal vent sites in the Cayman Trough. On-land research has focused on the application of an integrated geologic, mineralogical, and geochemical approach to better understanding the processes responsible for the copper and cobalt ore deposits of the Zambian Copper Belt. Today, Stephen will be presenting on investigations of modern vent sites and the feedback loops between these natural laboratories and terrestrial volcanic-hosted massive sulfide deposits. And now I'll turn the attention to Stephen.
So without the title, so let's push on. And I guess to start with, we have to have a little think about why investigate metal precipitating seafloor hydrothermal vent sites in the first instance. And I guess there's various reasons. some of which are more or less pertinent to the exploration geologist. But for a start, they contribute to ocean chemistry, and this bottom right slide here shows the relative fluxes of hydrothermal fluid over riverine, and we can see, you get fairly obvious inputs into the ocean of things like iron and manganese from these sites, but also other material like lithium, potassium, rubidium. And you also have sink environments where, these vent sites, by virtue of the alteration, is particularly looking at sequestering magnesium and a sulfate from the oceans. They contribute heat loss from the planet. So again, this top right box here, we can see heat flow prediction through the seafloor. We've got a theoretical curve of what that should be. Then we've got the actual measured heat flow shown along the dotted line. And this gap here is widely attributed to the hydrothermal circulation of at these mid-ocean ridge vent sites. From our perspective, I guess, today they provide a natural laboratory for VMHS formation. We've got some typical chimneys here, some diffuser sites here. This is from the Cayman Trough. And I guess we have to think a little bit about potentially sites of future resource extraction. And this is just a cartoon showing the likelihood of potential sulfide deposit extraction of polymetallic nodules. Neither of which are taking place. It would appear that polymetallic nodules have the lead. Sulfide deposits, I guess their fate has been largely wound up with the Nautilus saga. Resource importance of copper deposit types. Well, obviously porphyry systems dominate. VMHS systems are less so, but present about 3% of annual copper production. That's still in the region of nearly 100 million tons, so it's not insignificant. There's a global distribution of vent sites. This is from the NOAA site, and these grow almost daily. The more exploration that constructive and destructive plate margins are produced, the more vent sites we actually discover in a whole variety of environments. And that's going to be the theme I'm going to try and develop in the first part of the talk, is how different environments enact different alteration processes that are characteristics of that geotectonic environment. And I'm going to do that using two sets of information. The first, I'm going to take data from the world's deepest known vent sites in the Cayman Trough. This is the UK remotely operated vehicle, rather challengingly called ISIS, but it is able to depth certified to more than 5,000 meters, has the ability to carry geophysical equipment and sample remote, surface material. As I said, this was deployed into the Cayman Trough, and these are just some pictures of some of the vent sites we've seen. These are the normal chimneys. These are so-called diffuser flows. And when we look at these diffuser settings, a little later, we'll see a role they may play. Second set of data I want to look at is bringing International Ocean Discovery Program data. This is the JOIDES resolution. This is the moon pool. This is the Derrick. This is the 24-hour drilling operation. This program recently coming to an end. And we recognize about 4 or 5 major ocean drilling campaigns that were specifically located on hydrothermal vent sites. We have leg 158 at TAG, 139169 Middle Valleys round the Fuca, 193 Pac Manus, and 376 Brothers. And I sailed on Pac Manus and Brothers expeditions. We can recast that data in terms of the geotectonic setting of the vent sites. For example, we've got the classic sort of TAG drilling a classic mid-ocean ridge, the ODP legs 139 and 169 looking at sedimented forearc, 193 looked at a rifted back arc, and the Brothers system looked at an actual oceanic arc volcano. So what I want to do is run through data from TAG through Pac Manus, then through to Brothers, and see what changes or characteristics fall out in terms of what we find at each separate geotectonic setting. So what I want to do is look at how complicated vent site alteration patterns and varied hydrothermal alteration fluid pathways often variable at the local scale. evidence that tectonics, and then sort of look at some little topics along the way. One would be that looking at the role of tectonics at active sites, that they can play a key role in vent location and fluid flow. And then I thought I'd like to look at the development of gold-rich deposits. Obviously, the gold price at the moment has a major impact, perhaps, on the viability of certain VMHS deposits. And what constitutes or what helps develop a gold-rich VMS deposit can be a range of factors, and I'm going to offer 3: plume-influenced host rocks, the spreading rate of initial oceanic crust formation, and modes of hydrothermal fluid discharge, vents, beehive structures. I'm going to finish with 2 more quick items: investigation of the bead vent field, amplifying our understanding of the key elements of mineralization, including the potential of topography on vent sites and vent site preservation. And then finish with some seawater sulfide experiments, which highlight the potential role of oxide formation in preserving hydrothermal vent sites into the geological record. So let's start with hydrothermal alteration. If we go, this is a sort of classic cartoon that developed largely by Susan Humphries and the workers who went to TAG a few years back now. And you see we're looking at a basaltic system where we have an alteration sequence that runs through and was, in this instance, been defined by these drill cores that you can see at various places within the mound. So we go from chloritized basalt breccias into silicified wall rock breccias, and then we have this sort of pyrite and hydrous material located towards the core of the system. I'll come back to this diagram on the left in a minute or two. So by virtue of, we can look into those various vent sites, and we can look into those various drill holes rather. And one of the things that comes out is the abundance of anhydrite. In fact, estimates based on the drilling results that the TAG mound currently contains about 165,000 metric tons of anhydrite. Now, using that anhydrite and stable and radiogenic isotope analysis gives us insight into the circulation of seawater within the deposit that's causing the alteration that we've already looked at. If we look, what we're able to do in these systems is look at strontium isotope ratios as stable isotopes rather than radiogenic decay systems, where we know that the signature of MORB is around 703. We know that seawater is around 709. And we know that, and what we find is that in this instance, the anhydrite suggests that the seawater coming in is rock dominated, that the fluid coming in is rock dominated and giving us this hydrothermal system. If we go to this TAG 5 North drill hole, again, we see that the system is very much rock dominated. But the central hole that runs through the middle of the mound, we can see that as we start off with a essentially rock dominated system, and then we start to see this turnover as we approach, as we come through the central system, as we can effectively see the ingress of seawater as we move to this outer end member. We also find instances where individual hand specimens can have cores that look like typical rock dominated systems and rims that are very much seawater altered. And it's those kind of data that allow for the cartoons to be drawn like the one on the bottom right here, which show ingress of seawater at various levels within the mound, and including the central upflow zone. So TAG, if you like, TAG represents an end member of a fairly straightforward mid-ocean ridge, slow spreading center with a basalt-dominated, chlorite-dominated hydrothermal alteration system. If we now turn our attention to the Pacmanus hydrothermal field, we're looking at a rifted back arc system in the Manus Basin here off Papua New Guinea. And we're particularly interested in a series of deposits that were described by the leg 193 to the so-called Pacmanus region within the back arc basin. This is a bathymetry map of the system. You can see you've got this transform fault, you've got these pull-apart structures, and you've got a thing called the Poile Ridge thrown here, and Pacmanus located within that Poile Ridge there. So it's a volcanic ridge standing proud of the nearby ocean floor. This is the Poile Ridge again bathymetry, and this time we're going to focus on this area here. And that's interesting for a few comments because it's a whole series of vent sites that have preserving massive, sort of semi-massive or massive sulfides. And also the other thing to note is the relative scale. So within a matter of a couple of kilometers, you've got a whole series of vent sites that in a terrestrial example would probably be representative of a land-based system. I'm particularly going to interested where the drilling was taken in Snowcap and Roman ruins. But as you can see, there are other sites, and particularly worth noting perhaps that Solwara and Solwara 6 and Solwara 8 were the sites that Nautilus Minerals actively explored as potential seafloor extraction of sulfides. But I'm interested here to see whether the same systems apply in terms of the relative amount of seawater interaction, or whether the hydrothermal alteration is very much the same. So we're going to compare Snowcap here to the Roman ruins here. This is a sort of diffuse venting site. This is an active venting site. This is just some slots from the ODP Leg 193 drill calendar, which shows the drill bit coming down, because we're now going to have another, perhaps I didn't mention that with TAG, but we're very much looking at the third dimension with these drill holes. Here's the vents, the actual vent chimneys. You can see here comes the drill string. And in this example here, we've got a re-entry cone established whereby, with the drill bit having been fully utilized, we bring the drill string back up, send it back down, and it uses this cone to bring, enable the re-entry into the site. A couple of things perhaps worth noting. On the scientific side, we actually managed to create our own hydrothermal smoker. And the date stamp is in fact true. It was actually the 25th of December 2000. So happy Christmas, everybody. Again, when we find in the drill piece, we find various things like pyrite breccias, more massive pyrite, chalcopyrite, and again the anhydrite in the system. When we looked at the alteration, we tended to look more at basaltic andesites with a chloritic fracture-related alteration. But this time we stand to see more bleached rocks, local development of pyrophyllite. So effectively, this sort of onset, if you like, of some form of argillic alteration, which we have not seen at TAG. That said, when we do our strontium isotope work at Snowcap, we can see we get the same relationship whereby we get a rock-dominated hydrothermal fluid becoming more seawater-like as it comes to the surface, whereas at Roman ruins, you don't get such a significant input of seawater into the system. You remain around this hydrothermal fluid throughout the system. The other way you can look at this is through fluid inclusion data. And again, here's the strontium data, and here's the fluid inclusion data, trapping temperatures, which show not only correspond with the increase of seawater, but also show how the fluids are cooling as that mixing takes place. So the cartoon now in Roman ruins is not that dissimilar to TAG. It's a chloride silica alteration system with chloride silica alteration as the main alteration characteristic, with ingress of seawater, but mainly a hydrothermal rock-dominated source. By contrast, in Snowcap, you still get seawater ingress, you're still seeing hydrothermal fluid, but you're actually seeing the first input of alteration facies that have sort of an argillic alteration, suggesting there's some sort of initial input of magmatic vapor into the system. So that sort of contrasts with what you see at TAG and sort of correlates with what you see at the Pagmanus hydrothermal system. And then finally, if we go to IODP Expedition 376 in the Kerma de Garc to the Brothers Volcano, which was done in 2018, there's a whole series of drill cores from the northwest caldera rim to the northwest caldera wall to the upper cone. So we've got this spectacular event, volcanic scenario with a whole series of potential vent sites. And if we look at the alteration, just some of the alteration that we see, you can see that again, you've got this very much this advanced argillic alteration. You're getting pyrophyllite, natural, nunite, native sulfur, and the like. Very different style of mineralization. There's a lot going on in this diagram, but again, the bottom line is you can see that the pyrophyllite coming into the system is There's this curve here giving you these interbanded sequences with the green crosses, which are actually chlorides. So in the deepest part of the hole, of one of the holes, 1530, you've got diaspora or perophyllite zones intercalated and locally overpinned by chlorite and illite-bearing assemblages. So again, you've got this indicative reaction with your relatively high temperature seawater-dominated systems. But if you move around the volcano at different locations, for example, in the upper cone, you get natural alunite assemblage and perophyllite. On the northwest flank, you get perophyllite and illite and quartz. On the caldera rim, you get mordanite, smectite. On the central flank, you actually get chlorite and quartz and the like. So now you have a cartoon that's much more complex in character, having the hydrothermal fluid, seeing seawater ingress, but also having these magmatic vapors coming in, particularly in relation to the cone, the resurgent cone system. So 3 geotectonic settings that reflect their differences in terms of the nature of the hydrothermal alteration that you see in each case and the likely fluid flow systems that are operative. And that's where you can start to get a feedback, because a good example, I think, of where the Brothers volcano has helped sort of better understand, let's say, a deposit like Wetter Island, Indonesia, which is located here in the Banda Arc, which where we have the rapid exhumation of some oceanic crust as a result of the Australia plate running into the Southeast Asia plate. And we find an island whereby, when this work was done, there were 3 main deposits, Lorocus, Kalikuning, and Maron, based in an andesite dacite system. They were really unusual deposits in the sense that at the time, the massive sulfides themselves were not being extracted. They were preserved because the resource was actually a barite, a sand-bearing gold system. So this is Kalikuning. This would be Lorocus, where you get, again, you find these sulfide mounds, exactly like you find on the ocean floor, with these blocky sulfide talus material. And in fact, in this deposit, was even winnowing of the top part of the system, which strongly suggested there was sort of seafloor weathering on the ocean floor. But the deposit was a massive sulfide, but the alteration system, it did have chlorite, it did have smectite, but it also had advanced argillic alteration. And I think at the time it was kind of referred to as a high sulfidation volcanogenic massive sulfide. But I think we have explanations for this kind of system now that are much more akin to the kind of observations that we've made at the Brothers volcano in terms of the ability to have both chlorite and advanced argillic alteration in one setting, depending on where you are in terms of the volcanic edifice. I just want to spend 60 seconds just reminding ourselves about deformation and the role of tectonics in these systems, because I think often so many of the cartoons and our historic understanding of these systems would suggest that, particularly when we're looking at VMHSs on land, one would predict that, or suggest that, or it would have been suggested that a lot of the deformation that you see would have been related to the abduction processes, that the faults or the major structures were abduction events. But we now know from surveys of the ocean floor at the fairly detailed level that actually there can be pretty the significant alteration and faulting actually taking place on the ocean floor. So this, and to give you an example, when we looked at the tag system, we saw it as a fairly perhaps an ideal seawater in, hydrothermal fluid out, so single pass system. But again, more recent work done by Susan Humphries and others now at TAG, looking at micro-earthquake and bathymetry, suggests that there's a significant normal fault, which is giving you the hanging, and that tag is in the hanging wall of that deformation system. And if we go to the BB vent field, we're going to look at some high-resolution bathymetry that was generated on the back of the remotely operated vehicle, about 50 meters above the seafloor, which gives you this fantastic imagery that you can see here. And the fault structure that's controlling the vent site is beautifully exposed here. And then you have your vent sites located throughout. You've got active vent sites like BB Woods, BBC, hashtag. Then you have semi-active sites, and then you have more now extinct sites. You also start to get that first idea that we'll come back to later, that you can actually begin to see the weathering and the spalling off of these sulfides as they become extinct and actually begin to weather away and collapse away from and generating these mass flow events coming off these as the sulfide deposit grows. Partly because this is on a slope, and we'll look at that in a bit more detail. But the high resolution swath bathymetry, I think, overlain with lithological boundaries, gives you a detailed picture of deformation. So we've looked at different vent sites, different geotectonic settings, and I mentioned we were interested in, well, what can contribute, what factors can contribute or correlate with gold-rich VMHS? And I want to offer up 3 examples of where we've looked at this. First thing we did was using Ian Pitcairn and others' low gold technique at Southampton. We looked at the relationship of the Reykjanes Ridge as it approaches Iceland. Iceland is plume influenced, hence it's a ocean ridge spreading center that's actually above sea level. The Reykjanes Ridge runs progressively up towards Iceland and progressively picks up that plume signal as you move along from north to south. When you measure the gold content of these at these various sites as you move along towards the surf, towards Iceland, you can see that they become increasingly gold rich. So by the time you get to Iceland itself, you're looking at gold values that are around 13 times more gold than normal mid-ocean ridges. So these are the background. This is mid-ocean ridge values here. These are the values from the lower part of the thing. This is from the island itself. Now that doesn't mean you'd want to rush and start digging up Iceland, but what we do find there is that the metal-rich crusts that come onto the geothermal gradient there can have as much as 600 parts per million gold assayed for the basalts that are exposed, for the material that finds its way into the geothermal systems as precipitates onto the various metallic material that's within the geothermal cells. So that's one way we can see an increase in gold content. There's also a correlation we find between spreading rate and gold content of oceanic crust. And again, this example shows that the slower spreading centers, often dominated by ultramafic material or slow spreading basalts, tend to be more gold rich than typical mid-ocean ridge basalts. We can recast the data here for slow spreading rate. The black dots are mid-ocean ridge basalt hosted deposits. The open squares are ultramafic hosted deposits. And they plot at this end because this is where you expose those periodic material by having ultra slow spreading, whereby you take up the extension by faulting, ultimately bringing up periodicites towards the ocean floor. But what we can see is that there is this broad correlation. So the slower the spreading, the more gold we seem to have preserved within our system. And we can think about this in terms of a series of cartoons. So A is ultramafic hosted SMS at ultra-slow spreading ridges. We've got wide areas of venting forming large gold-rich low relief seafloor massive sulfide mounds, for example, Rainbow, where we got the average ultramafics at around a ppb, and we're envisaging pervasive fluid flow in fractured ultramafics and permeable serpentinite. We also think these are deep, long-lived hydrothermal cells, and that's also reflected in the strontium and oxygen isotope signatures that we find in these systems. We could then look at more mid-ocean ridge basalt-hosted ultra-slow spreading. Again, we find large gold-rich steep cone-like mounds, for example, that we see at the BB vent field in the Cayman Trough, where again you have hydrothermal fluids refocused onto the mafics above low-angle detachments. Mob-hosted slow spreading on slow spreading ridges, vent fluid signatures again rock-dominated, largely moderately gold-rich deposits, for example, broken spur. Again, we have these intermediate long-lived hydrothermal cells. And then finally, at fast-spreading ridges, we have vent fluids with less rock-dominated strontium oxide signatures, so the fluids have had less time to interact with the host rocks and effectively mine the gold from those systems. And we end up with small gold poor deposits like EPR 1130 degrees north. So in an ideal world, we're looking for plume-influenced oceanic crust that's slow spreading, but then for me, one of the more interesting and somewhat ironic features here is that at BB, we know we can analyze the fluid that's coming through these normal vent structures versus the fluids that's coming through these so-called beehive diffusers. So you've got the same starting hydrothermal fluid, but they emanate onto the ocean floor for whatever reason, manifestly different ways, either as a typical tower, if you like, versus these diffuser systems. And here's some tomography showing one of these diffuser systems. I'll come back to this in a minute. So what we find there is that the gold occurs in a variety of environments with pyrrhotite, in some cases iron oxides, or associated with chalcopyrite. But the key takeaway point here is that the normal vent sites and talus plot down here at relatively low grade, but the diffuser chimneys, focused chimneys of Beeb and hashtags show the lowest gold contents, whereas the beehive chimneys have a mean average of 48 ppm and the highest value of 93.6 ppm. So this suggests that ultimately, whether you have a gold-rich system could actually come down to the nature of the fluid that's emanating from the seafloor at a given moment in time, in terms of the structure, the hydrothermal structure or edifice that it actually transfers through as it comes through the system. And that's what's kind of dictated here, where we're actually looking at the gold coming out as the pyrrhotite is developed in this reduced environment within the actual mound itself. And staying on Beeb, we can actually see as well that when you look at this diagram again at the top, you can see these debris flows developing around here. And these are debris flows of sulfides because of Beeb being formed on an environment that's not planar. And as a result, you're sending mass wasting material, as you can see here, and generating these graded bedded systems that you can see here, which would often, I think, would find their way into the geological record as almost like turbidic systems. So again, the role of topography in the formation of an idealized VMS deposit. Flat topography gives us a general model which allows preservation and remineralization of sulfide as the mound grows, whereas steep topography gives us leaching, copper zinc leaching, as the system falls down. So in an idealized system resulting from B, we have a main ore body with a lower tonnage and stockwork, barren pyrite lenses, and metalliferous sediments with grade dependent on background sedimentation. So to be sort of slightly trite, but so what these studies I think show is that in an ideal world you want a plume, you want slow spreading, and you want beehive structures. And if you get all three of them, you enhance your ability perhaps to generate these gold-rich VMS. And the last thing I'd want to talk about very quickly is the potential for these systems to be actually mined in a seafloor mining scenario. These are the machines that were developed for Nautilus in terms of their ability to grind sulfides on the seafloor and bring them back to the surface. This is a sort of idealized model. This is Solwara, which we looked at briefly earlier. This would be the main support vessel. You have a riser system once you've crushed the sulfides up. And one of the questions we thought we might want to be interested in was, well, if you're going to crush these sulfides on the seafloor, you're exposing their surface to seawater. To what extent is copper and the like, and lead and zinc, iron and zinc going to find their way into the surrounding seawater, potentially as giving a toxic event? So we built a little cell with a reaction vessel. We put in monomineralic sulfide samples into the cell with a magnetic stirring bar. We filled it up with synthetic seawater, and we then started to pipette from a sample port after a few minutes. In the first instance, every hour for 9 hours. And we looked at particularly iron, copper, and zinc. So if we look at copper in the first instance, we can see that it starts to the concentration of copper in the cell coming off the sulfide samples increases steadily during the first 9 hours. So from 0 to 9 in a fairly linear manner. The iron finds its way into the seawater at an increased rate, and then hints at it starting to plateau out after about 6 or 7 hours. And the zinc goes into solution pretty rapidly and stays flat beyond that. When we then do these experiments for a little longer, in this case 70 hours, 75 hours, we can see that the copper has started to plateau out after about 50 hours. The iron has not only plateaued out, it now appears to be being sequestered back out of the hydrothermal cell, and the zinc's again showing fairly rapid entry into the seawater that plateaus out throughout the rest of the time series. And what we find is, unsurprisingly, that when we're looking at what's going on in terms of the copper plateauing out and the iron being sequestered, is that we're getting these oxides now forming onto the sulfides. So as you crush these materials, so fairly rapidly, so if you crush this material on the ocean floor, the suggestion would be that it would very rapidly be mantled and oxidized and therefore protected from rapid erosion. So hopefully I've covered a few aspects of these systems that hopefully suggest that complex vent site alteration patterns and varied hydrothermal alteration fluid pathways often variable on the local scale. There's evidence that tectonics at active sites play a key role in vent location and fluid flow. That the development of gold-rich deposits may depend on a range of factors, including plume-influenced host rocks, spreading rate of initial oceanic crust, and modes of hydrothermal fluid discharge. Investigations of the bead vent field amplify understanding of key elements of mineralization, including the potential role of topography, and seawater sulfide experiments highlight potential role of oxide in preserving vent sites into the geological record. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.
That was amazing. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing your research with us. Those bathymetry images were, every time I see those bathymetry images of those seafloor vents, it's always like I'm always awestruck.
Yeah, I think the high resolution stuff off the back of the ROV is true, is game changing. I mean, it's just incredible the resolution you're getting and the ability to image the vent sites, active and otherwise.
Yeah, I might have been on your image, but what is the resolution of those?
That's a good question. I don't know the actual answer to that. It's very good, but it's within half a meter, I'm sure.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, it looks like it for sure. All right. Well, I don't want to steal all the questions during our question period. So I just want to bring to everyone's attention the question bar, the question and answer bar at the bottom of your screen. So if you could drop in any questions that you might have, can definitely bring those up with Stephen. And Stephen, if there are any questions that come up after our Q&A period, you can also type an answer into the chat as well for everyone.
Okay. Okay.
All right, well, I can start. All right, we have one question from Steve Piercy. It says, great talk. You showed well that spreading rate influenced the gold content. In looking in the ancient record, a major challenge is trying to figure out the spreading rate. How might you suggest we go about figuring this out, given its implication for gold mineralization?
Off the top of my head, Steve, I'd say maybe stable isotopes in terms of oxygen, because that can give you an indication of how long or the extent of fluid rock interaction that has taken place in a given system. I don't think you can, so it's a kind of proxy for the alteration process. I think that's how I put it.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Steve, for your question. I have another question. So obviously spreading rate and the, like the great ingredients are to have a plume spread, a slow spreading rate. And you also mentioned those beehive structures. I was
Yeah.
wondering if on a micro scale, like obviously if we have a VHMS deposit that's been deformed and it's on in the ancient record, would you see
Yeah.
any micro textures that would show that it's was formed on a beehive, or would it just be, I guess, lost?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, for a start, you've got to get rid of all the anhydrite and the material that's going to dissolve and be replaced. The sulfides themselves are going to recrystallize. I think it's quite hard to imagine that those kind of textures would survive into the ancient record in a meaningful way. I mean, maybe, but we'll see.
We have, I think, a question coming for us.
Well, I see answered. How would we actually preserve these deposits? The usual way is to drop something on top of them in fairly short order. But I think there's more work done now. At the PhD student just finished looking at seafloor weathering, looking at the older mounds they do oxidize, but they still manage to make as they migrate across the ocean floor. They do oxidize, but they do still preserve a sulfide component. And then the question is, I guess, is how you abduct. Again, how you actually abduct them into the terrestrial system is. Sorry, my glasses are struggling to read this. Yeah.
Yeah, we have another question that is it a clue? I think it's asking if there's a clue for gold, for exploring for gold mineralization in ophiolitic complexes.
I think some ophiolite complexes. Well, if you're looking for gold per se, I guess you'd be looking for lisvonites, which is a alteration system related to the gabbros and peridotites that you would get in an ophiolite complex. Whereas here we're actually talking about gold related to VMSs. So, a good example there is if you look at Cyprus or if you look at Oman, you're looking at and it goes back to the preservation question. There will be gold in the system. It's a question of whether the tenor is sufficient to make it an interesting, a viable tenor in terms of a credit that would be, a gold credit that would be viable as part of the extraction process. And then in those, so you're really looking, I would say you're looking to explore. You're seeing the gold predominantly as a secondary effect, a secondary mineral, I think,
Okay.
rather than outright ophiolite.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's great. I guess, yeah, this question from Joseph is, oh, a lot of questions coming in now. But it goes more to, I guess, possibly the seafloor mining. Would you have a proposed plan for tailing storage, or how would it comply with current national and international standards?
Well, I think many of us followed the tortuous history of Nautilus Minerals and their campaign to get, and they ran into various issues. There's no question. I guess there's various ways of looking at this. First of all, that although these deposits are rich, they are small, and they would rapidly. You need to be moving along from one side to the other. When I say rich, they have a high copper zinc tenor. There's also no question that there will be a release of effluent from the oxidation of the system on the seafloor, and copper is one of the more toxic elements that would come into play. Equally, you have a source of contamination from the above, where you're looking at drying out the sulfides and returning the water into the ocean from the drying process. So I think in terms of complying with international standards, I don't. That's a good question. I don't
I'm
know
sure
if there
there's a
are
lot of
any
work still to
international
even
standards.
develop standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think we have time for one more question. We have a question from Taryn in the Q&A box. They say, I can picture how, well, first of all, thank you for the fantastic talk. I can picture how plumes introduce gold from the upwelling mantle, but I'm intrigued by the higher gold grades associated with the ultra slow and slow spreading centers, seeing as these are so magma poor. Is it a case of the unmelted peridotite having higher gold, which can then be leached by hydrothermal fluids, despite the fact that there is not much magmatism to provide heat and potentially volatiles?
Yeah. So I think it's about the time. It's a time integrated event in that the longer, and that so that the peridotite numbers per se are not that elevated in the slow spreading ridges. It's still around 1 ppm gold. But what the data suggests is that the hydrothermal cell is much longer lived, and there's more permeability in the rocks by virtue of them being serpentinized, the peridotite being serpentinized. So those factors combine. We think those factors combine to give you that more enriched system.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question in the chat. So from Jamila. Hello, very nice presentation. Thank you. They would like to know how the variability in vent fluid redox conditions across different spreading rate regimes influence the metal tenor and zonation of seafloor sulfide deposits.
Yeah. Wow.
A bit of a
Not sure I know the answer to this in the sense that the different. Well, I guess no, I'm going to pass on this one. I'm not sure I really know the answer to that, so I'm not going to bluff my way around it.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Maybe a research project for someone else. All right, we have another question from Bepo. So does the VMS deposit by definition relate to the process only and not the commodity? I guess that's first part of the question. And then what is your understanding of the case where some VTM deposits are associated with these copper and zinc deposits in a volcanic environment?
Yeah, I guess volcanic massive sulfide deposits by definition relate to the process only, not the commodity. I guess that's true to some extent, but then when people think about VMSs, they're typically thinking about lead, zinc, copper, lead, zinc, aren't they? So then what is, as I understand the cases where the VTM deposits are associated with these copper and zinc deposits in volcanic environment. Again, I'm not 100% sure what is the understanding about the cases where some VTM is. I don't know what VTM is actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure either, unfortunately. Maybe Vipoa, you can help us out in the chat what that means. But in the meantime, we have another question from Youssef. Please, are there any associated deposits to low sulfidation paragenesis?
Yeah, you could argue TAG is a low sulfidation. If you wanted to, you could argue TAG is a low sulfidation deposit in SK Creek and Wetter Island, and the Brothers Ark are high sulfidation deposits.
Right, with all those the alteration that alteration in those drill cores that you showed us. All right. We have one more question in the chat. So usually gold mineralization is found within the low temperature, or forming in low temperatures, but you mentioned that prittertite has an effect to form gold mineralization. What is the genesis of this gold in ultramafic rocks?
Well, I think we kind of just hinted at that a moment or two ago. I think there is the prittertites per se are not that enriched in gold, but then their permeability and their longevity and their by virtue of the serpentinization, we think the slow spreading gives a longer interaction, and the enhanced permeability gives them a more chance to react. So they're not, if you like, hot prittertites coming into the system.
Right. It's already in situ. Makes sense. What are, I guess before we kind of move on, I have some questions. What area, in this area of your research, what are some of the next areas of work that you foresee being of interest or a hot new topic
Whoa.
for young geoscientists that might be interested in
But
this?
well, gets like me, that's not going to be not likely to be on the agenda. Where to go? Wow, I hadn't really given that much thought. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to say I don't know.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll have some people, I'm sure people were inspired by your talk and, are already going and thinking of how they can relate it to their work. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for presenting your research with us. It was really informative and very visually interesting as well. So thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much. You're very kind.
All right, I will go back to sharing my screen. Next, we'll have, oh, sorry. My,
Looks good, Joy.
all right, thank you. Now I would like to warmly welcome SEG President Ann Thompson to join us and share her thoughts on the Society's accomplishments and developments from the past year.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Joy. Okay, everybody, you can see you're good?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes,
Thank you very
you're
much. Nice to see everyone. It's really wonderful to be here and to participate in this traveling lecture symposium. And we're always so grateful we can share these types of lectures globally. So yeah, I just want to talk briefly about the highlights of 2025 and a few of the challenges and opportunities that we're looking forward to in the coming year. And first, though, I'd like to pay respects to Jose Arce, Pepo, as we knew him, who passed away on the 2nd of December this year. Pepo was our president-elect for 2026, an extremely valued member of the geoscience community globally, and particularly in Peru, where he lived and worked, and had embraced SEG and his opportunity to be president with great enthusiasm and much love. And we were all shocked and saddened by his loss. So we face this in the coming weeks and months to continue on and work to the best of our ability in his honor. So the highlights of 2025, which I've been very honored to be president. We have established a strategy, which we revealed at the beginning of last year. You can find it on our website. But the big work for this year was to create an implementation plan, and that's been led by our executive director, Jennifer Craig, here at our offices, but with much input from volunteers and leadership. And we now have the basis of a plan to continue to work towards all of the aspirations that we had developed and the things that we want to do to continue to grow and improve the society for the benefit of members and those else outside, also within our community. Of course, one of the biggest successes of the year was the SEG 2025 conference in Brisbane, where we had 1,200 participants and a fabulous technical program. We've also had some publication highlights this year with the publication of the geology and mining book, Evolutions of Best Practice, which was edited by Dan Wood and Jeffrey Hedenquist, and is now available for purchase and also as open access. So that's a huge addition to the resources available for learning and understanding our whole the mining value chain. We also published 2 lithium special issues in economic geology. So economic geology, obviously, for us is a highlight every time it comes out, but these lithium issues were particularly valuable. So in terms of challenges, obviously, as I've just mentioned, the replacement of Pepo is big on our minds, and council and our leadership are working to that end. That said, we have all, taken on the jobs and the roles that are needed to keep the society. Will be working very well. We have a very strong staff, and obviously our executive director, Jen, and we will continue keeping everything going as you might expect it to, and look forward to establishing a new president-elect. We will be looking in 2026, and I'll be leading a governance review and continuing to modernize how SEG functions and our systems and processes. So we look forward to doing that, and also to continuing to get input from members on that process. We're looking and working hard on developing new skills training for early career professionals, which Ellen Wilson, as president, will be taking the lead on and tell us more about at the end of this seminar. And we're also continuing to work on our conference planning. So you may know us as having a conference every year. we have shifted to an every 2-year cycle. So we have a conference coming up in 26, and then the one following that will be 2028. In the intervening odd years, we will be partnering with other organizations, associations, societies globally, and supporting them in their events, but we will not have what we've called an SEG flagship meeting in those off years. So that's a bit of news about where we are and what we're doing, and we look forward to working with everyone on that. So this was the Brisbane conference. We were very lucky to be in Brisbane, and Queensland is obviously just a beautiful place. And I really want to thank the organizing committee for that event with Chair Rick Valenta, Mark Nope. Jen was obviously very involved, and Nick Oliver as the technical program lead. So these were hugely, everyone worked hard, and the whole entire organizing committee worked very hard and produced just a stellar event. So we're looking forward now to SEG 2026 that will be in Salt Lake City. The end of starts September 30th, goes into early October, and that website is live. You can go and start to check it out as we populate content, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to see the Western U.S. experience some of the fantastic geology. And of course, Bingham Canyon, which is the backdrop to this slide, is right there in Salt Lake City. So the organizing committee there has been very well, is in great shape, and they've got things well under control. We've got Stephanie Mills as the conference co-chair with Rachel Boulanger, and of course, Jen at the helm, and Simone Runyon as the technical program lead. So very excited about what's coming for Salt Lake, and hope that I will see all of you there. So to conclude with some thoughts for the end of the year, I really want to give thanks to Steve Piercy, who was president in 2024 and has been past president this last year and supported me throughout my tenure and has done phenomenal things to help advance SEG. So as he steps out of his role, we want to really send our appreciation to him, and also to our outgoing counselors on council. So Sarah Gleason, Elizabeth Sharman, and Robert Kayemba, who have all given us 3 years on council. It's much appreciated. And to the entire staff in SEG and here in Littleton, we have a huge group of people that work so hard to get out the publications, organize events, support volunteers, take care of membership issues. The list goes on and on and on. And we are so lucky to have such a capable group of people. So I look forward, as I go to be past president, to continue to interact with all of you. We are always, any of the leadership are very open to ideas and obviously to volunteers, and also interaction around everything that we do. So with that, I'll say thank you and stop my share.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne. You were an amazing president this year, and I saw you speak at the SEG conference, and I felt super inspired and really thankful for everything that you've done for us in this past year and what you will continue to do. So,
thank you very much, Joy. And we're very, very grateful to have you as such an ardent supporter. So thank you. All right. Cheers.
Thanks. All right, so I will go back to sharing my screen. All right, well, Mei-Fu, thank you I see that you've joined us bright and early.
Yes, I'm ready here.
Awesome. Oh, wrong screen. Here's a beautiful backdrop of the Yukon. All right, so before you present Mei-Fu, I would like to give a brief introduction. So Mei-Fu Zhou is a research professor at the Institute of Geochemistry, Chinese Academy of Sciences in China. Professor Zhou obtained his bachelor's degree from Nanjing University in China and a PhD degree from Dalhousie University in Canada. He was a postdoctoral researcher at Laurentian University in Canada before joining the University of Hong Kong, where he taught for more than 25 years. His research includes ophiolites, large igneous provinces, mineral deposits, and regional geology. He has published more than 450 papers in scientific journals with more than 45,000 citations and an H index of 118. Today, Mei-Fu will be presenting on the passage of mafic magmas and formation of chromite deposits in the upper mantle.
Thank you very much, Joey. Good day, everybody, wherever you are. Here it's very early in the morning, about 6 o'clock. And the title
Mei-Fu? Oh, sorry, Mei-Fu.
Okay.
I see all of your PowerPoint slides. I'm not sure if, okay.
Okay, so it's okay now.
Yes.
The title of my talk is Passage of Mafic Magmas and Formation of Chromite Deposits in the Upper Mantle. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to talk about the most recent progress in chromite studies. Chromite is the only minerals for extracting chromium, which is widely used in many fields, including defense, aerospace, refractory materials, chemical, medical industry, and new technologies. And chromium is considered to be critical metal in many countries, partly because of global distribution, very unevenly. Major producers in the world are South Africa, followed by Zimbabwe and Kazakhstan. Major chromite deposits include stratiform and polyform chromite deposits. Chromite is an oxide and crystallized typically early in the magmas, but it is very dense, much denser than silicated magmas and olivine. So once chromite formed in the magma jumbles, chromite would settle down and accumulate at the bottom of magma jumbles. And so the settling of chromite in the crustal magma jumbles would form sometimes maybe in big layers, in layered intrusions, and form stratiform chromite deposits. Examples are Bushfield complex in South Africa and Great Dyke in Zimbabwe that make these two countries number one and number two producers in chromium metals. On the other hand, chromite deposits can also form in the upper mantle, and now they are hosted in the mantle-petitotides of ophiolite. And ore bodies are usually irregular and lenticular or veinlet ore bodies with variable size. For example, here, that's on the top left is an example from New Caledonia. The chromite ore bodies are hosted in the dunlite veins. The ore bodies are quite small, and the chondrite rocks are transitional from dunlite to hasbachite, and some other examples, like in Tibet. That's one of the ore bodies has been already nearly mined out, but the shape of the ore bodies are still there. Lenses of ore bodies, but the size can be variable. And the largest chromite deposits of this kind is in Kambers in Kazakhstan, that make Kazakhstan number 3 producer of chromium metals. And this deposit has the reserves of 500 million tons of chromite ores at the grades of 40% of chromium oxides. And some unique features of this type of deposits is they have unique nodule texture for the ores, in addition to massive and disseminated chromite. And they have very simple mineralogy, olivine plus chromite. And this type of deposits typically considered to form in a subduction-related environment. And recent studies of non-traditional isotopes, for example, lithium isotope, which is very powerful because no fluctuation of this kind of isotope during partial melting and during the magma differentiation. So compositions of olivine in the chromite ores can be used to indicate the composition of the parental magmas from which chromite crystallized. And clearly, they have heavier lithium isotope than normal mantle, so with involvement of slab-derived components. So in a summary, the consensus about the formation of polyform chromite deposits, chromite crystallized from mafic magmas, and the chromite ore bodies are hosted in mantle petitotites. But in the upper mantle, there is no large magma chamber. To form chromite deposits in the upper mantle, large amount of magmas are required. Okay, and they form in magma conduits when the magma passing through the upper mantle and in a subduction-related environment. And in the 1990s, my own work and plus and maybe a number of other studies about the environment of chromite deposits, they are related to subduction zone environment. And in my studies, early studies, I have proposed a melt-rock interaction that trigger the crystallization of chromite. And above subduction zone, melts are focused and passing through conduits interacting with country rocks to generate the ore bodies. But the main issues remains about the origin of polyform chromite deposits. First is the trigger of chromite crystallization in the upper mantle. And the second is the concentration of chromite and the localization of ore bodies. And in a usual case, partial melting of a asthenospheric mantle would generate melts that move upwards. In that case, in the mantle, they pass through the mantle, the temperature would not drop very quickly, and pressure would reduce quickly, okay, when the melts move upwards. So in this case, the crystallization of chromite is not favorable because reducing the pressure would not cause the crystallization of chromite. It's not favorable for crystallization of chromite. And many studies actually, for example, in Stillwater complex, people proposed that because of the increasing of pressure, more and more magmas get into the magma chamber. Increasing the pressure is more favorable for the crystallization of chromite. That means reducing the pressure is not favorable for the crystallization of chromite. But in the chromite deposits of this kind, we know there are a lot of chromite there. And so the crystallization of chromite from the magmas is evident. In addition, there are some reports of skeletal chromite in some of the polyform chromite deposits. Although they explain this differently, but I consider this maybe quick cooling. Okay, so in summary, early skeletal chromite, quick cooling, and later they are surrounded by granular chromite, and later chromite, slow cooling. Okay, so chromite is not only crystallized in the upper mantle, but maybe crystallized very quickly. So in this case, what triggers the chromite crystallization in the upper mantle? Where and why does chromite crystallize? Evidence is in the associated minerals in the chromite ores. So I just summarize some recent reports together with some of my own studies of associated minerals. We can divide this into several groups. The first group is common silicated mineral inclusions in the chromite of the ores. This include olivine, pyroxenes, and the chromite, which can be easily understand because the country rocks are hasbagite, netherite, or even dunite. So these minerals are not unusual. They maybe represent as minerals included in the chromite, when chromite crystallizes. And second group of minerals is multiple phases inclusions. This can be taken as mild inclusions after crystallization of chromite. They are included in the chromite and crystallized as multiple phases. And typically, these inclusions are indicative of high-stress, high magnesium magmas in composition, and which are typical. There are several studies on mild inclusions in chromite. And cluster minerals are also identified in the chromite ores. These include amphibole zircon plagioclase, can be easily explained as amphibolite facies rocks or cluster minerals. And in the past, maybe 10 to 20 years, a lot of studies from my colleagues in China about high pressure minerals in the chromite, including some minerals like coesite, hyenite, garnet, and diamond. And these are not only mineral separates, but also mineral inclusions, in situ inclusions observed within the chromite grains. And I'm not going to talk about the details about these minerals, but a summary of these four groups of mineral inclusions clearly related to subduction zone environment. For example, amphibolite facies rocks or high pressure minerals and low pressure minerals like cluster minerals. These are maybe most likely related to subduction environment. So what we can get all these minerals in the chromite ores, and the most possible place would be the subducted slab between amphibolite and eclogite facies. Okay, we have a high pressure minerals, we have low pressure amphibolite facies minerals there, and here, if subducted slab changed metamorphic phases from amphibolite to eclogite phases, and that will be the place for break off, okay, because of the density of eclogite is much heavier than amphibolite. And here would be the place deeper asthenospheric melts can be passing through this this window, okay? So in this case, we can explain why both mantle and cluster minerals and both high pressure and low pressure minerals can be included in the chromite, imported from chromite deposits, if chromite crystallized here, okay? So that might be one way to explain all these different types of minerals in the chromite ores. And at the same time, the simulation of subducting materials into asthenospheric melts with changes of compositions. And because of the rapid drop of temperature, and so skeletal chromite can also form in this case, okay, because of the drop of temperature due to the contamination with subducted slab. Okay, so here would be the place that can trigger the chromite crystallization. So the next question is about the transport and the unloading of chromite from the magmas that passing through the upper mantle. If chromite crystallized due to this interaction here with quick cooling, and then the magma, if the magma can transport these chromite grains from deeper part to the shallow part for localization or for concentration, okay, to form ore bodies in a suitable place, this would be very significant for understanding where we look for deposits and useful for mineral exploration. Okay, again, chromite is much heavier than silicated magmas and olivine. So in usual case, they would not be transported within the magmas if the grain size are big in grain size. And that's why in many volcanic rocks, like mafic, ultramafic volcanic rocks, we do not see larger grains of chromite phenocrysts. Although we can see tiny chromite grains included in olivine phenocrysts, but we do not have big crystals of chromite. It's partly due to the dense nature of chromite grains. So in normal case, gravity force and the buoyancy force, okay, for chromite in the magmas, okay, these two forces, if they are equal, then no problem, they can go together with magmas. If gravity force are larger than buoyant force, then chromite would be settled down into the bottom. So that's the case in the larger magma channel in the crustal level, big magma channels, and the magmas is not moving, and chromite would settle down on the bottom because of the gravity force, which means the chromite is denser than the magmas, has more than buoyant force. Okay, the particles are settled down, and for the chromite to be transported in the magmas, if the magmas are moving upwards, or if there is sufficient water, or water bubble exists in the magmas, and chromite may be attached with water bubbles. Okay, the water bubbles has a flotation, so there's a flotation of water bubble together with buoyant force. If both are larger than gravity force, then chromite can be transported upwards. So some experiments by Borehouse in 1998 and 2002, there are two papers published on this. And now we can consider water contents in the chromite recorded in the chromite ores. Okay, because the chromite ores typically contain fresh olivines, and from the study of olivine water contents, for example, there's a study by Chen et al. Olivine contain maybe about 20 to 48 ppm water, and the clinopyroxene occurs sometimes also in the chromite ores with water contents about 300 to 800 ppm waters. Okay, and note that clinopyroxene usually a later phase in the magma evolution during the chromite formation. So the water contents would be increased during the magma differentiation. So we can calibrate the parental magma water contents based on minerals water contents, and they are not more than 4%, 4% of waters in the magmas. Okay, that means much lower than that required for saturation of free waters in the upper mantle conditions, because mafic magmas in the upper mantle conditions can dissolve as much as like 8 or to 10% of waters. So perhaps no free waters available to flotate chromite grains in the magmas. Then what else that can take up the chromite in the magmas? And we can consider drag force. These are very similar to sands, okay, transported by water because of the different velocity of the magmas and the solid chromite grains. Okay, if there's a difference in velocity, then there is a drag force. So the drag force plus buoyant force, if they are more than gravity force, and the solid grains can be transported. Okay, so that's the principle. And the drag force can be calibrated using the velocity differences between the liquid and the solid, and the surface area, the grain size, and plus coefficient of friction. Okay, and the details of this calibration cannot be explained very clearly, but the main idea is that the velocity of magma flows and grain size of chromite grains and the viscosity of magmas are all contributed to the drag forces. Okay, and so the equation here on the the drag force and is really related to the velocity of magma flows. Okay, the velocity of magma flows are related to spreading rates, shape of magma channels when the magma passing through, and from this equation, we can see clearly the greater the velocity of the magmas, the greater the drag force is. Okay, one of the examples of in the upper mantle, we see some fossilized dikes, dunite dikes, which marks the final solidification of magmas that passing through the Hasselgite or Nazarite. Okay, and in this dike here, very clearly, in the middle, there are fine-grained of chromite in the middle because chromite is denser, and in the middle of the channels, and the flows are much faster than against the walls. So the heavier minerals are in the middle, but you can also see these are the very fine-grained minerals. Okay, and the particle size obviously matter. Because the smaller the particles and the easier the transport. Okay, so larger grains would be more difficult and smaller grains are possible. And viscosity of magmas, obviously, they contribute to the transportation. If the viscosity is larger, and transportation would be easier because it's more viscosity, with higher viscosity of magmas. And the grains can, the drag force would be much larger, okay, according to the equation. And so, in a summary, the chromite magma density difference is obviously, if it's larger, then more difficult. Okay, if it's closer to the magmas, it's more easier for transportation. And chromite size is, we know there's many disseminated chromite in the dunite which formed from the magmas. Okay, and the magma velocity, usually we can define the magma, the flow speed according to many previous studies. And the viscosity of pure magmas, we know the viscosity of pure magmas. But if with pure magmas, maybe it may be possible to transport some smaller grains of chromite. But if the magmas with higher viscosity and then with more potential, higher potential for transporting the chromite grains. Okay, so in what cases the viscosity is higher is if we use P-melt's thermodynamic calculation using primary basaltic melts, say 20% or 28% of magnesium oxide plus chromium oxide and the waters in the basaltic melts, and we do the calibration, and on the left side, the diagram is the results here. The first crystallized phases is chromite, okay, under higher temperature, followed by olivine, and eventually under lower temperature, clinopyroxene and also pyroxene crystallizations, depending on the composition. Okay, at the same time, when the chromite crystallizes only, and the liquid proportion would remain similar or remain the same, because chromite is very tiny. Chromium is a tiny trace element in the magmas. Until olivine crystallizes, olivine is ore-forming minerals. Okay, so it will reduce the liquid proportion. At the same time, if we look at the diagram on the right side here, the temperature drops and the chromite crystallizes, and the liquid reducing the liquid when olivine increases crystallize and increasing the proportion of olivine, and so at the same time the viscosity would increase dramatically when olivine crystallizes. Okay, with until clinopyroxene crystallizes, and the viscosity is getting much higher. Okay, but the liquid proportion is much smaller. So in this case, the best temperature window for higher viscosity, but a reasonable amount of liquid there for transportation would be a temperature window about 1250 to 1350 degrees. So that be the best temperature window for the magmas to have reasonable viscosity, and chromite grains only maybe with minor amount of olivine, so it's needed. Too high temperature without olivine, maybe the viscosity is not high enough, or the capability of magmas to transport chromite solid grains is not very good. But if temperature is too low, then too many olivines, so insufficient liquid magmas, so which is not good for even for the magma itself. It's not able to move upwards. So in this case, when the magmas interacting with subducting slab, the temperature drops to the temperature window, and at the same time assimilating to trigger the chromite crystallization, and the viscosity increases because maybe down to the temperature of olivine crystallize, and the minerals can be transported in the mantle wedge upwards. So the next question would be the localization of chromite ore bodies in the upper mantle, and chromite grains can be transported, can be deposited if drag forces are reduced, either due to one or more of the following changes. Okay, the growth of mineral grains, bigger sizes. If the minerals getting bigger during the transportation, and then they can be deposited or unloaded if they get a bigger size. This might not be the case because the temperature will not change very much after the interaction, after the crystallization of olivine. They move upwards where this will not reduce the temperature. And reducing the viscosity of magmas, that will reduce the capacity of magmas for transporting solid grains. In this case, it's not possible because the magmas, once formed, they were not increasing the temperature. The temperature maybe drop a little bit, and so that means more and more crystals may be possible that increase the viscosity. It's not reducing the viscosity. So the most possible mechanism for unloading the chromite is the reducing velocity of magma flows. Okay, when the magma moving quicker, then change to maybe reduce the velocity of magma flows, then the capacity of magmas for carrying chromite changes, and therefore maybe unloading or concentrating of chromite grains in a suitable places. So three cases can be possible in the upper mantle when the magma passing through the upper mantle, the mantle wedge. And the first one is the channel or the magma, the conduits getting bigger. And in this case, on the left side, and in this case, magma may change the flow velocity. And the second one is vertical to tilted direction. Okay, and therefore the flow velocity may be reduced. And the third one, be more like an extreme case, is from vertical to horizontal direction, and magma changes the flow velocity. Okay, and so one way to examine all these three cases is computational simulation of fluid dynamics in magma conduits. And one example of a simulation, computational simulation, was done a long time ago. That was by Lago in 1982. Since then, there's no similar studies available. And in his model, he used pure magma simulation with result solid. So the actual movement of particles is only speculative. And you can see here on the left side here, and the magma coming up into the conduits, and the conduits is getting whitened. Okay, and the velocity of the liquid you can see here is changed. Is also changed. It's calculated magma flows is nominal flows. And so if chromite, in his model, chromite particles collided under laminate flow conditions, but no quantitative analysis of transport and unloading mechanisms. So what we do, in addition to the pure magma flows through this magma conduits, which are whitened, and also we add solid into the pure magma flows. And we'll see the results here. On the left side, that's basically what Lago did in 1982. The paper was published, I believe, in EPSL. And on the right hand is the overmodeling adding the solid. And apparently, there are changes of velocity of the flows of the solids as well. And we can see a little bit details about here. This is a crucial place here when the magma enter to the whitened conduits. Okay, so we'll see the structure. That's chromite-bearing magmas. We add the solid chromite into the magmas, and we'll see the change of the convection of the flows here. Chromite, eventually chromite are removed partially, maybe totally sometimes. So the decreasing of velocity with circulation, and here would be the favorable site for unloading chromite. Okay, when the magma enter to the whitened conduits. But here we can also see the places are not sufficient enough, okay, to form larger ore bodies. We'll take three cases together. We'll see that's the first case. That's what I just described to you, whitened conduits. And the second case is changed from vertical to tilted direction. And the third case is from vertical to horizontal, and then the magma still passing through these conduits. Okay, so we can take a look more details in the extreme case here on the right side. Okay, so we can continue introduce of magmas. So we call this continuous injection of chromite-bearing magmas. Okay, and first case, we use small particles and the fast magma velocity. Okay, so in this case, we have parameters here. I cannot detail this. So we can see the chromite grains can be partly precipitated in this case when the magma continues injected into the conduits, and they partly precipitated, but mostly escape from the outlet, from the conduits on the right side on the top. So these are not very favorable for the ore formation. Okay, if the particles are small with continuous injection, and so the magmas, the conduits is a dynamic conduits. Okay, but if we consider a periodic injection, which is also quite reasonable because we see pressure-aided ores, and the ores, the formation of chromite ores sometimes maybe multiple stages. We see chromite ores are pressure-aided and cemented by later stage of chromite ores. Okay, so in this case, it's possible periodic injection, injected magmas, okay, and stopped, and then followed by another pulse of magmas, okay, injection. So even with small particles and the fast magma velocity, and in this case, and chromite can be precipitated more effective than the continuous continuous injection here. Okay, so that's possible, but still have some a bit of chromite on the bottom of the on the conduits here. You can see there, but there are still some chromite escape, okay, during the injection of the magmas. Okay, so the third case, if we look at the injection of continuous injection of magmas, of chromite-bearing magmas, if the grain size are large enough, okay, and the velocity is not high enough, so we consider this second case with larger grain size, lower magma velocity, so that's be more effective, and most particles can be precipitated during the injection. Here you can see here the modeling simulation is more favorable, particularly if we use periodic injection. This is most favorable, most effective concentration of chromite from the magmas. Okay, if larger particles and the lower magma velocity with periodic injection. Periodic injection means one pulse of magma coming and then eventually stop the moving, so that have a more efficient time and also reducing the velocity at the end of one pulse of magmas, and so that make a more favorable case to form deposits. So considering all this, the favorable place for ore concentration or for localization of ore bodies would be somewhere near the Moho boundary, when the upper mantle rocks starting spread away from the spreading center. Okay, the spreading center here would be a more favorable place to deposit chromite ore bodies. So it's localization of ore bodies there. And so in this case, we can see magmas going through to the conduits. They change the direction or the orientation of the flow orientation. But what was going on in the conduits, if we consider the nodules there, nodules are common features in proteoform chromite deposits, but not observed in layer intrusions in other examples. There's no other examples of such nodules. Okay, this has long been a mystery for geologists. Okay, in the 1950s, Russians and Chinese explained this as immiscible origin. That means chromium melts there. This is obviously not possible because of the high temperature will be required. And there are other explanations for like a deformation or some other like a water bubble involvement to form these nodules, but none of this are well explained the formation of nodules and why there's a unique environment there. So this must be happening in the magma conduits when magma injected into the conduits, and there chromite undergo modifications. Okay, so what's going on in the magma conduits? And we can take a look at the nodule itself. Okay, the features before we can do something to understand why there's a formation of a nodule texture there. So major features of chromite nodules with the chromite ores, and they are typically spherical to elliptical in shape. The sizes can be variable from 0.1 to 2.5 centimeters in diameters, and they are evenly and sparsely distributed and surrounded by olivine, mostly olivine, the other minerals, okay, the gum minerals, okay, and they have similar nano Gaussian distribution. And so these are one of the major features. And the other features, we can see the nodules if they are multiple grains or single grains, and apparently using EBSD clearly document that some of the grains nodules are single crystal, and other nodules are multiple grains, but they can be easily explained by deformation, okay, or recrystallization, okay, because they occur in the upper mantle. There's a high temperature deformation. So some nodules, even with size up to 1 centimeter, are monocrystalline, single minerals. Most nodules are monocrystalline originally, but later deformed or fractured. Okay, so looks like multiple grains together. And very important is that the chromite has a very good wetting for with the basaltic magmas. Okay, so that for example, dihedral angles of two grain junctions in different samples range from 18 to 31 degrees, mostly about 20 degrees. So it's a very good indication of wetting, good wetting of basaltic melts for chromite. And another major features of chromite is near isotropic solid melt interface energy. Okay, and finally, what happened to chromite in the magma conduits with chromite features like this, and the chromite was in the magma, and then in the conduits, magma continues, the temperature remains the same. So chromite would undergo textural re-equilibration, thermodynamically driven by minimizing the total interface free energy. So that's of the system. And so one way to do this with all these features together, we can use the Monte Carlo pure state ports model for simulation using computer simulation. The details cannot be explained here clearly, but we can see the results, what the results are here. We can see the magmas going through the conduits continuously. The temperature remains the same, and the grains are getting bigger and bigger. Okay, the same chromite grains, because all these kind of features, and we can eventually get the nodule form morphology of the chromite grains. In this model, nodules, single nodules are a single crystal. Okay, and so eventually we have reproduced this kind of texture in the conduits using computer simulation. And so what we can see here, we can compare natural examples, nodule examples, same nodule, same ores have similar size nodules. Okay, you can see here clearly similar size, similar shape of all nodules. And also we have the similar cases from the computational simulation, okay? So uniform sizes, all these kind of features are duplicated in the through the computational simulation. So here is the place for unloading, for localization of ore bodies with continuous or periodic replenishment of magma through the conduits and structural evolution via unloading accumulation or grain coarsening, okay, to form nodules in this in the conduits when the magma flows changes orientation, and eventually the formation of chromite ore bodies in the upper mantle. Okay, so to conclude my talk, it's two stages formation for the polyform chromite deposits, and the first extensive crystallization due to the interaction of melts, deeper melts, asthenospheric melts with the subducted slab, okay, which trigger the crystallization of chromite and transported by the chromite with more upwards and from the spreading center or maybe possibly new spreading center, and chromite can be concentrated and unloaded, concentrated to form larger deposits, ore bodies there. So this model would have significant implications for chromite exploration, tectonic setting of ophiolites, and tectonic fabrics of hosting pegmatites may be really useful for localizing the ore bodies. Okay, that'd be my talk. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you,
Joey?
Mei-Fu. Yeah, that was amazing. That was your animations, everything was really spectacular, and I learned a lot. So thank you very much. All right, we're going to move into our Q&A session. Mei-Fu, if you wanted to stop sharing your screen. And
Okay.
in the meantime, oh, awesome. Perfect. You're big now. Everyone can see you really well.
Okay.
All right. If anyone has a question, if you could please put it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, bottom or top, depending on your setup. We have a couple questions that have come in already. We could start with a question from Tawana. I'm going to read it out. I don't know if you have it open in your chat as well, but Tawana is saying that in the Zagros orogenic belt northeast of Iraq, field studies show that pillow basalts associated with serpentinized rocks and brecciated. Okay, sorry, I'm going to read that again. Field studies show that pillow basalts are associated with serpentinized and brecciated serpentinite rocks. The chromite mineralization can be observed under BSc EPMA image analysis, and subrounded chromite grains are replaced by iron oxides, and antigorate lizardite are major serpentine minerals. Based on this information, could we report that the origin of chromite refers to the basaltic rocks, or does the serpentinization process have any effect to form chromite?
Okay, this is very common for chromite to be associated with serpentine. Is very common in many ophiolites, and because all the many ophiolites are highly altered or shared in some cases. So serpentinization, I would say, is secondary. Chromite is primary. So particularly chromite ore bodies and the country rocks with a big contrast. Okay, so surrounding the chromite ore bodies typically highly altered, which are the case in many places. Okay, so we cannot take sublimation as primary, and the chromite formed during sublimation is, I think, is impossible. But in China, actually, because I work on chromite in the past 2 or 3 years because of the problems with chromium, which has a shortage in China with chromium. So we work on the exploration for chromite ore bodies and using serpentinization as an indication for locating chromite ore bodies. And during serpentinization, chromite and even olivine are modified and with not more magnetite to form, which are associated with serpentinization. So in my opinion, serpentinization and the chromite ore formation are totally separate. Okay, but serpentinization has maybe very good indication for exploration, and particularly if magnetite is formed. So therefore, we can use geophysical survey to locate in some chromite mines, not all. Okay, and sometimes maybe some fresh chromite ore deposit is there, and sometimes in some other case, strongly alteration with serpentinization and the magnetite formed, and then the magnetic features are obviously different from other from other country rocks. So that otherwise is very much similar chromite ore bodies and haspeite and netherite, very much similar in geophysics, in physical properties. Okay, so we have lots of experience in the past few years for exploration using serpentinization and magnetite. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question, and thanks. Great answer and discussion. We have another question kind of related to exploration, but a question from Rodrigo. He says, "Thank you for a fantastic talk. On metamorphosed chromium deposits, is it possible, or it is often difficult to distinguish the type of deposit, whether it's potiformed or a layered intrusion? Looking only at the chromite themselves, is there any way to determine which it is?"
Yeah, that's a good question. That's in fact, it's not too difficult to distinguish stratiform or polyform chromite deposits. In ophiolite, there are both types of chromite deposits in the cuminate sequence or in the dunite, transition zone dunite, which is on the bottom of cuminate sequence. There are chromite ore bodies there, but more like a stratiform chromite deposit type. And in the mantle sequence, hosted in maybe in haspeite or netherite, it's polyform. Compositionally, may be similar, but field relationship can be very useful to distinguish these two types of deposits. Most useful message would be from the field relationship to distinguish these two types of deposits.
Right. No, that's great and helpful. We have a question from Gary Fung. Thank you for the talk. Recent experiments have shown that chromium can be transported by saline fluid or melt in the upper mantle. Is it possible that chromium 3+ or 2+ are transported by ligands and complexes in saline magmatic fluid and deposition by redox or chemical reaction like metasomatism in the upper mantle rather than fractional crystallization and settling?
I know there are some reports of hydrothermal chromite deposits, but very rare. Other than that, I do not think it's possible in typical polyform chromite deposits, which are transported by this kind of fluids, or I would not support the idea that the majority of polyform chromite deposits formed in that way. But there are some maybe hydrothermal deposits, chromite deposits, but not many examples. They're formed by some hydrothermal fluids.
Okay. Of all the chromite deposits discovered so far, what percentage of them would you say are podiform deposits?
You mean overall the percentage of chromite, podiform chromite and stratiform chromite?
Yes.
I think that Bushveld is dominated the world production of chromite is at least more than half of it
Yeah, I guess
on
that
one single
alters
deposit. Yes,
I guess
yes,
that heavily
yes.
biases that question.
And podiform chromite deposits are usually small in size, except one example that's in Kambersai, Kazakhstan, that's joint deposits. And actually, one ore body has the reserves of total reserves in China. Only one single ore body in Kambersai, that's Kazakhstan. So it's, we are looking for giant deposits of this kind, but very difficult.
Yeah.
So I would say stratiform chromite deposits are much simpler, either for exploration and at the moment, mostly is from stratiform chromite deposits for the chromium resources.
Well, maybe after watching your presentation and reading your work, the audience will find more. So we have a couple more questions in the question answer box. So one from Robert.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so extensive, approximately 1 ppm level palladium plus platinum mineralization with disseminated chromite. And okay, I think so. Robert is asking about the Pedra Branca deposits and the Sierra State Brazil, and they have disseminated chromite with 1 ppm level palladium plus platinum, and approximately 10 ppm palladium and platinum with more massive chromite. Do these make sense with your described model for the podiform deposits, podiform type deposits?
I'm not really got the question. Not really got the question. Is about platinum palladium in the chromite related to massive or disseminated chromite ores. Does that
Yes.
mean? Okay. Well, so chromite, podiform chromite have some platinum mineralizations in some cases. These are usually byproducts. If they are up to 1 ppm level palladium platinum, that I think it's quite high concentration, and maybe it can be used as byproducts. In my model, that might be possible if there is saturation, sulfur saturation. Okay, if sulfur saturated and deposited together with chromite, that might be possible to form some PGE rich chromite ores. But maybe I need to do some. We need to look at case by case if some chromite in the cumulative sequences or in the mantle. Okay, and so the mineralization styles can be very different if they are in the podiform type of ore bodies or in the stratiform ore bodies in the cumulative sequence.
Right. All right. Okay, I think we have last question. Oh, sorry. Extremely low. Okay. We have one last question from Adriana. So in the case of stratiform chromatites, how can the layering of coarse chromite layers with fine chromite be explained? Would it be a process similar to growth of potiform chromites?
Determine the type of deposits. Distinguish different type of potiform or layered intrusion. I'm not so sure what.
In case of stratiform
In
chromatites.
case of stratiform, how can
Yes.
the interlayering of coarse chromite with chromite with fine? Oh, okay. Okay. In potiform bodies, we do have several stages of ore formations because we see pressure-aided ores, and that means maybe different stages of ore formation. Okay, so in that case, it's possible in some stage maybe formed coarser grains, and other stages maybe fine grain. Okay. So if there are interlayers of coarse grain and fine grain, this is really good question because we really see banded chromite ores in the potiform bodies. Okay, banded, we say banded chromite ores. This is possible in the magma conduits. Okay, they deposited chromite and from different pores of magmas.
Okay.
Okay, because this situation can be very different from the larger magma chambers. Okay, so I would say that's possible from different pores of magmas with different size of chromite grains.
All right, awesome. Awesome. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our question period. Thank you so much, Mei-Fu, for all your answers, and thank you to the audience for your questions.
Thank you so much for your wonderful organization.
Of course. Well, yeah, we really appreciated it. I know those diagrams will be spinning in my brain for the next couple days. So awesome. All right. Well, I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. We're now gonna hear from Alan, our SEG President-elect for 2025, Alan Wilson.
Thanks, Joy. I actually have a couple of slides that I want to share, so I'll just share my screen.
Yes, yes, please.
And it's going to be this one. All right, cool. I'm on the wrong page. Can everybody see that?
I see your, oh, yes, yeah, now it's good.
Great. All right. Well, first of all, a big thank you to Steve and Mei-Fu for a couple of fascinating talks. Definitely not my area of expertise, and I learned an awful lot. So, on behalf of SEG, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us this afternoon and this morning, in your case, in China. We registered just over 80 participants in the seminar and the symposium. So, thanks to all who participated, and it's great to see strong interest in these lectures and the opportunity to share the knowledge widely within the SEG group. So first of all, I wanted to introduce the 2026 lecturers, keeping in theme with this seminar. First of all, our distinguished lecturer for 2026 is going to be David Rees from Canada. He will be, as I say, the distinguished lecturer. He is a consulting geologist based in Vancouver, well known in the industry with mining and exploration companies, particularly those with problems in structural geology in gold deposits. He's got more than 30 years experience working in gold and base metal districts for a variety of companies, focusing on advanced projects and mining operations to help them understand ore controls and for training their teams. And he's going to be offering a variety of talks, characteristics and structural controls on orogenic gold deposits, tectonic to deposit scale controls on the style and ore controls in epithermal gold deposits. And he's published some amazing things on that in the past, so that'll be excellent. Geology of Carlin and Carlin-like deposits from the Great Basin to China and beyond. And then, in keeping with his love of training, gaining knowledge in ore deposits from structure in drill core, practices and constraints from field relationships. So some real practical training there. Our other three traveling lecturers for 2026, in no particular order, we have Irene del Real, who will be the international exchange lecturer for the year for 2026. Irene is currently an assistant professor at the Universidad Católica in Chile. She has her geology degree from the Universidad de Chile in Santiago, a master's from UBC in Canada, and a PhD studying the Candelaria district from Cornell University in New York State. And her current focus is on understanding the genesis of Andean iron oxide copper gold deposits, amongst other things. She again is offering a range of talks unraveling the formation of Andean iron oxide copper gold deposits, formation and evolution of the Candelaria Punta del Cobre IOCG district in northern Chile. Some interesting stuff that she's been doing outside of her traditional research, future availability and challenges of mineral deposits, and also regolith-hosted rare earth deposits in south central Chile. The 2026 Thayer Lindsley visiting lecturer will be Mike Robertson from South Africa. Mike is a principal consultant with the MSA Group in Joburg, and he specializes in the application of applied structural geology to understanding controls on ore genesis and exploration targeting that he has done throughout Africa, Western Australia, Russia, Kazakhstan, Uruguay. He will share his experience on various ore deposit types that he's worked on, the importance of structural geology on ore controls and mineral deposit formation, and then share some of his experience in mineral exploration techniques, case studies. And then finally, Christina Wan Yang will be our Regional Vice President Lecturer for 2026. She has a PhD in petrology from the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing and has another PhD in geochemistry from the University of Hong Kong. Has completed additional studies, postdoc at ANU in Australia, and now she is employed as a research professor in Guangzhou University or the Institute of Geochemistry at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And her focus is on petrology and origin of mafic, ultramafic intrusions and related nickel, copper, PGE mineralization and iron titanium oxide deposits. So obviously her talks will focus on that, specifically the origin of magmatic nickel copper sulfide deposits in convergent margin settings, a synthesis of magmatic nickel copper sulfide deposits in the Emishan large igneous province in southwest China, formation of iron titanium oxide deposits in layered intrusions in southwest China, and then finally microstructures and 3D characterization of magmatic ores. So there's more information on all of those on the SEG website. There's instructions on how to invite the lecturers to come and give talks at your institute or university. So that'd be great to see that lesson, that offering of different lectures for 2026. So just touching on education and training in general, this is our final seminar for 2025. Throughout the year, depending on how you cut it in all of the SEG offerings, we've offered almost 40 education and training opportunities throughout the year. A very diverse group of offerings, from porphyry mapping courses for students at Copper Flats and Cuajone, that's in New Mexico and Peru. There's been technical workshops and symposium on a range of different deposit types, sediment-hosted copper deposits, the Central African Copper Belt. There was an orogenic gold deposits of Africa, symposium held, and then also a symposium or workshop on VHMS deposits using rocks from the Curwen collection at the Royal Ontario Museum in Canada. Field visits to a number of places, a mine remediation field course for students and professionals at some historic mine sites in Colorado. There's been field trips co-led with the SGA to the hydrothermal systems of the Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. And then, of course, lots of activities through the numerous student chapters that Jen mentioned at the start of the seminar. So lots going on. And finally, workshops on soft skills as well, such as conflict resolution, empowerment of women in economic geology, and also business-related training opportunities for students and professionals alike. So lots going on, and that will continue in 2026. One of the things that we've been doing through my tenure as chair of the Education and Training Committee this year is conducting a bit of a strategic review to see what do we do, and most importantly, where could we do more? And there's definitely a gap that everybody can see internally on discovery skills for early career professionals or discovery skill training. So internally, leadership is now starting to formulate plans to fill these gaps and fund training for early career professionals with some access also for students and more senior professionals. So this would focus on geological mapping and field skills. It would focus on the logging of drill core and RC chips and 3D integration and interpretation of the outputs from logging. Applied integration of geochemical and geophysical data, again, to develop and enhance exploration and deposit models. And then also keeping the E in economic geology, introduced courses on the basic understanding of mineral economics, capital markets, and asset values. So there's going to be a lot going on. We're still in the early stages of developing this concept, and importantly, how we're going to fund it in a sustainable way. We won't neglect what we already do and do well. So there'll be a large slate of offerings along the lines of what I covered earlier. We, of course, have the conference in Salt Lake City that hopefully many people can make it with a big slate of field courses and workshops around that also. So yeah, it'll be a busy year, and we continue focused on one of our key objectives in our strategy, which is to provide education and training opportunities to all parts of our membership. So with that, I'll stop sharing and Joy, hand it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. And as an
No
early career
problems.
professional, it makes me very excited to know that all of that work that is getting put towards providing more opportunity for early careers to advance our skills in that way. So thank you for supporting us, and look forward to it.
Absolutely. You guys are the future. Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, kind of following up on that, here's some upcoming instructional events that will be taking place. So the first is a 1.5 day course at the Roundup Conference in Vancouver called Choosing and Using Geophysical Tools for Exploration and Mining. And I am super excited about this one because I'm actually attending it. So Anne's little post on LinkedIn worked. It got me. So I signed up for that. We also have a virtual course, Drill, Deal, or Drop, Exploration Decision Making Through Commodity and Project Cycles. That's a virtual one, so that's exciting. And then a 1-day course, Gold Deposits in Greenstone Belt, which will be hosted at just before the PDAC conference at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. So those are happening in the end of January and and throughout February. So exciting couple months ahead. And for all of you podcast lovers, don't forget to check out the incredible stories and interviews available through SEG's podcast series, Discovery to Recovery. And student chapters should note that the podcast competition is once again open for early 2026 submissions, and SEG invites all chapters to produce a 12-minute interview-style audio podcast telling your geoscience stories from the world of ore deposits. Teams have the chance to win cash prizes and potentially be featured in an episode of Discovery to Recovery. Stay tuned. And we are very excited, as Alan already mentioned, we are very excited to invite you to the 2026 SEG conference taking place in Salt Lake City, Utah. This conference will showcase world-class technical content while highlighting iconic ore deposits and geological processes from the North American Cordillera. The program will explore innovations, breakthroughs, and discoveries throughout the entire mining value chain with a balanced focus on applied case studies, framework geology, and technological innovation. Attendees can expect these themes across a vibrant slate of field trips, hands-on short courses, technical sessions, and unique events throughout the conference. Please visit the SEG website for more details, and we hope to see many of you there. And we'd like to thank all of the attendees and, of course, Stephen and Mei-Fu for presenting such amazing presentations on your advances in economic geology, and all of our Jen and Alan again for sharing with us, and all of our SEG members for supporting events such as this. So thank you again, and please complete the survey that will appear once the webinar has ended as well. This will just help us continue to prepare and share these kinds of events with all of you. So thank you very much, and have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you might be. All right. Thank you.